Hello, everybody. I'm Sylvia Gonner, and I'm a culture whiz. I'm excited to share with you some tips on delivering events globally because virtual has no borders. So my word of inspiration is harmony. Let me share with you why. Imagine a world of harmony. When I think about harmony, I think of an orchestra of talented musicians and the beautiful music they create together. Can you imagine what it would be like if the world operated like an orchestra, where we all rely on each other's talents and contributions to create something that none of us can do on our own? That's harmony. When I think about harmony, I think of a fish tank where many species, common and exotic, bright and dull, big and small, all swim together. Can you imagine what it would be like if we all learned to coexist and our differences in cultures, ages, lifestyles, and viewpoints wouldn't just be respected, but leveraged for the greater good? That's harmony. When I think about harmony, I think of marathons where thousands of people run in the same direction without tripping over each other. And they're cheered along by bystanders with words of encouragement. Can you imagine what it would be like if we all learned to run in the same direction and there were no winners and losers, but nobody would go home until we all crossed the finish line? That's harmony. And finally, when I think about harmony, I imagine a holiday dinner where there is lots of food because everybody brought something to the table to share and nobody goes home hungry. Can you imagine what it would be like if we all worked together in peace to make the pie bigger rather than fight each other for a bigger piece of the pie? That's perfect harmony. I wrote this poem in 2012 on an assignment on a corporate retreat with an international group that was not working in harmony. It inspired me to bring more awareness to the benefits of working across cultures. You see, I was fortunate to be born in Brussels, Belgium, in the heart of Europe and the birthplace of the European Union. I say fortunate because as a result of that background, today I speak 6 languages. Being multilingual is rather common for a European, but it does set me apart here in the United States, where I've been working my entire adult life. I use my languages all the time as I work in international management and travel extensively. I've been to 70 countries at my last count. Throughout my career, I have organized and been involved in hundreds of conferences and events, mostly in the association industry. I have done meeting planning at every continent, stretching anywhere from Tokyo to Dubai, Buenos Aires, Rome, Nairobi, and Orlando, where I currently live. Not surprisingly, like many of you, I'm sure, I've learned a thing or two about what to do and what not to do. I am now taking my event management experience and what I know about cultural differences to bring this expertise to the new virtual reality that has no borders. So let me start by telling you a story about a lesson I learned early on in my career. This experience still applies today in the virtual environment. I was organizing a conference in Benin, a little country next to Nigeria on the west coast of Africa. This particular event was an award ceremony that was held poolside at a high-end hotel in the capital city of Cotonou. We all know that organizing an event outdoors has its risks, the weather. But the locals repeatedly told us that it never, ever has ever rained in Benin in January. So against our better judgment, well, we didn't have a plan B. You know what's coming next, right? The hotel staff had just finished setting up everything, and we had white cloth tables around the pool. We were ready to start the champagne toast and bring out all our guests when the most torrential rain came down out of nowhere. So for only about 5 minutes, huddled under an umbrella, we watched the rain completely drench everything, to the point where the food station, where half of our food was set up on, just was blown right into the pool. Everything was ruined. Well, what happened next is probably for another session on crisis management. You know, we did end up feeding everybody, and eventually it turned out okay. But the lesson learned, I will never forget, is to always have a plan B. So right now, so many of us are scrambling and participating in this conference to learn how to go virtual because maybe we didn't have a plan B. Certainly not one for a global pandemic. Never did we imagine that all travel and all gatherings would come to a stop like this overnight, worldwide. So the good news is rain will not ruin our virtual event. Well, I do live in Florida, and I've learned the hard way that a hurricane will knock out power and the internet. So you've guessed it. What is the number? Traditional or virtual? Always have a plan B. So exploring plan B alternatives was the topic of discussion on a Zoom call I held last week with a group of CEOs from 25 countries who all had to cancel or postpone their conferences. So here's what's on their mind. This group shared that actually not everybody in every country is ready to go virtual. In some countries, their audiences are not yet comfortable with distance learning. Some indicated they will actually wait until they can meet face-to-face again. Some mentioned concerns that the internet is too unstable in their country to make it a good experience. Well, that might change soon with the Starlink satellites that are now orbiting in space. But these CEOs were all eager to explore ways to adjust their business models and embrace the new virtual technologies of conferences. A key concern of theirs was engaging participants in the experience and finding tools to facilitate networking amongst the attendees. So here is my engagement part of the session. If you haven't already done so, let me hear from you. What city are you from? What country are you from? Please comment in the chat. So you'll notice that the map I'm showing may look different than what you're used to. This is how our Aussie friends see the world down under. This perspective will help set the stage for this session, as this is all about understanding and appreciating cultural differences that are critical in the virtual global world. So this opportunity we have to reach across the world comes with a responsibility. Chances are your virtual events will transcend borders, whether you intend to or not. If you're going to accept registrations from other regions of the world, you have to understand what it means to go global. Don't let it be an afterthought. To reap the benefits, you must try to avoid some of the pitfalls and the risks that come from being unprepared. So in this session, I'm going to share with you some concrete tips that you can use for your virtual events and some simple measures you can take to prepare. This information will be helpful to meeting planners, to executives, to speakers, anybody involved in the industry, or any form of distance learning for that matter. I'll cover 3 key recommendations. Avoid localized terms, don't assume one size fits all, and embrace cultural literacy. Some of this advice is about being relevant and appealing to a multicultural audience, whether domestic or global. And some is more serious, focused on brand protection and reputation. So let's start with avoiding localized terms. My first advice is time zones. When it comes to your program, don't refer to morning and afternoon sessions, but rather think about calling your lunch break a meal break. You know, that way you cover all time zones. You know, I attended a virtual conference that was taking place in Europe last week as I was waking up, and they were on lunch break. And by the time they were on the increasingly popular virtual happy hour, I wasn't really ready to partake in that. And you may know the expression, when we're ready for a cocktail, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Well, If you host a happy hour, remember it's not 5 o'clock everywhere. And as far as speakers are concerned, it can be off-putting when you start your session by saying, good morning, everybody. Why don't you grab your cup of coffee and we'll get started. But your participants in Malaysia and Singapore just put the kids to bed. Like they will feel overlooked, ignored. So a nice good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, will show that the speaker understands the audience. You know, other localized terms are seasons. You know, if you have a winter conference you're advertising with a snow theme, your attendees from Chile, Argentina, and Australia, where there's in the middle of the summer, they will not feel connected to your event. Another one is the use of expressions. It's one of the worst types of localization. If you're advertising an early bird special, you know, many non-Americans will not understand what that means. So avoid expressions, abbreviations, jargon, and analogies that are local and that will not make sense to an international audience. You would be surprised how much we all speak in code. Americans love sports analogies and make absolutely no sense to the rest of the world. And these are really prevalent in the theme of our events or in interviews and storytelling. So for example, when I tried to pitch this idea to my boss, I thought it would be a piece of cake and that I would knock it out of the park. I had already put a bug in her ear about it, but last time I tried, I got cold feet. I totally missed the boat, but I'm not gonna drop the ball this time. I sometimes feel like a fish out of water when I talk to her. She often gives me the cold shoulder. When it comes to creative ideas, her and I do not see eye to eye. I didn't want to end up in hot water, but I'm going to let the cat out of the bag and let you know that she loved my idea. It was a slam dunk. And you know the icing on the cake? It won't cost her an arm and a leg. Well, anyone who doesn't have English as their first language or knows American sports will not understand much of that lingo. So expressions are a no-no. Now, finally, be careful about imagery, particularly when you select photos with people in them. You know, it's very hard to pull off globally, even if you try to depict diversity. Realize that what we think of diversity may look different depending on where you stand in the world. Depending on where you're from, the images on the screen may appear rather foreign to you. If you saw them on an event site, you might immediately localize the event rather than perceive it as catering to anyone in the world. But then again, pictures aren't just about people's ethnicities and their clothing. There's another less obvious impact on photography. That takes me to my next point. Don't assume one size fits all. Do your homework. There are greater risks involved if you don't do your homework that many companies have learned the hard way. I'm going to show you some examples of critical mistakes that turn out to be offensive, insensitive, or made these companies appear ignorant. These are the types of things that can create serious damage to your brand. It could save you a lot of money, and you know that brand reputation takes a lot of time to build, but it can be tarnished in an instant. I pulled this image on the left from a brochure not long ago because while this hand gesture means okay in many parts of the world, it has a very different and offensive meaning in Brazil. I'll let you know. I'll let you imagine what that is. And I don't know if you know the story about Kim Kardashian West and the launch of her shapewear she created. She originally named it kimono. It was a play on words that used her name and as a means to nod to the beauty of the traditional garment, the Japanese garment, the kimono. However, this turned into a huge controversy before launch when it was pointed out that using the word kimono would be insensitive to Japanese culture, where she has a huge following. This was not a case of cultural appropriation that was perceived as offensive. Although it cost her a fortune and some delay to the millions of garments she had already manufactured, Kim eventually made the right choice, and she changed the name brand before launch. So the following companies weren't so lucky and found out too late about major cultural mistakes. So here's an old one that I love. This campaign from the 70s was exported from Britain to the United States. At the time, in the UK, the word sucks just meant to vacuum. But you can imagine the reaction when that ad hit the United States. How could this happen? Well, the Swedish company that owns the product made the basic assumption that one size fits all, and they did not do their homework. Neither did these companies, by the way. See, now this is where I missed the live audience because I'm hoping this gave you a chuckle. Don't experiment, do your homework. Nike didn't when they launched this logo worldwide without first testing it. They learned the hard way that this symbol depicting flames resembles the spelling of the word Allah, which means God in Arabic. And they didn't just miss it once in the 90s, but again last year with a brand name printed on the bottom of the Air Max shoes. Now, adding insult to injury, in the Muslim culture, the soles of your feet and shoes are considered dirty and shouldn't be shown, much less used to advertise and denigrate God. If you're not Muslim, you may not see this looking at that image, but it doesn't matter. Nike had to recall thousands of these shoes from the Middle East market, and the damage was done. It goes to show that we all see things through our own eyes and lenses, and that it's critical to do your homework and not assume that what works in one market will work everywhere. Continuing with images, here's a nice one. And for those of you planning virtual programs that would reach global audiences, you may think the use of flag is a good idea. Flags are often selected as an obvious international image, but beware. For many people, flags are important national symbols with strong emotional attachment. Mistakes in the use of flags can create huge diplomatic problems. I've seen mistakes happen using flags, using the wrong flag in a country, displaying a flag upside down, or omitting a flag from a collage like this one on the screen. And speaking from experience, people will get upset if their flag is missing or was cut off. So let me just put a disclaimer out there and be clear, if your flag is not on this collage, this image was only selected to illustrate my point. I recommend you avoid the use of flags. Don't use flags to display languages, a common practice that actually makes no sense at all. You know, when you have a list of languages, you stick a flag next to it, but if you pick the American flag for English or the French flag for French, well, you will offend many people. There are 29 countries in the world that have French as their official language. N'est-ce pas, mes amis du Québec? Bottom line, it's safer to avoid flags altogether. And let's talk about speakers. When it comes to speakers, I recommend you check their slides for symbols or messages that could be offensive, or you should give them guidelines on dress code to demonstrate sensitivities to a multicultural audience. Here's something that is often overlooked. Remind your speakers to speak more slowly than they would when speaking to an international crowd. This happens especially when they are cramming an hour of material into 30 minutes. I can't tell you how many times I've received comments from attendees who have English as their second language or may not be familiar with the accents that they didn't understand anything because the person speaking was too fast. The good news is there's a solution with virtual events. You can offer closed captioning because reading while listening will help fast talkers be better understood by international audiences. Closed captioning offers support to those viewers, not only the hearing impaired. So obviously, Nobody sets out to be offensive, insensitive, or misunderstood. Not companies, not meeting planners, not speakers. But in the online space, whether you're live streaming, 100% virtual, or redistributing your content on demand, your content will cross international borders. And you want it to, which is both an opportunity and a responsibility. More than ever, developing some cultural literacy is critical in the new normal. Culture is often compared to an iceberg. The majority is only visible below the surface. Culture is so ingrained in our essence and our behavior that we don't know it's there. We're not aware it exists until we step out of it and observe others in other countries. If someone from another country is behaving in a way that appears strange to you, it's because culture impacts our beliefs, our communications, and our behaviors. It's like the software of our brain. It molds our tastes, our values, our habits, our likes and dislikes, and just about everything. It guides our communication styles, our body language, our perception of time, and even how societies view authority and make decisions. I'm very passionate about learning and sharing ways to better understand and appreciate cultural differences. So my last piece of advice is to develop cultural literacy. So what does that mean? We must learn to observe, interpret, and behave in a culturally mindful way. It starts by being aware of our own culture and seeking to understand other cultures. So if you're American, you can appreciate some of the values that mold your culture. The values listed on this slide may feel so familiar and natural to you as motherhood and apple pie, as we say, but they are far from universal. Other cultures at times hold very different values than ours. So to be culturally literate, we need to appreciate that we see the world through a lens that is so part of us, it's practically impossible to change it. And you don't want to, because no culture is right or wrong. I am a culture whiz today because my brain was exposed from a young age to cultural differences, to observe and interpret these and learn to adapt my behavior, which I had to do when I moved from Europe to the US for college. Years of working with international teams has taught me techniques to facilitate cross-cultural behavior, communications, and to train people and companies to develop a global mindset. So don't miss an opportunity when going virtual to be culturally mindful, and if needed, to get the help from experts. People will notice and remember those who understand their audience and make an effort to avoid localized terminology. They will appreciate it if you do your homework rather than assume one size fits all and demonstrate a certain level of cultural literacy. Finally, I hope this time of crisis is our chance to create a greater harmony amongst people of different cultures. Join me to imagine a world of harmony where we bring together cultures closer and appreciate our differences and learn from each other to make our world a better place. My name is Sylvia Gonner. You can contact me at culturewiz@yahoo.com and check out my website. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Grazie mille. Vielen Dank. Arigato gozaimasu. Bye-bye.